today. Good start. Try again. Hi, my name is Zalmi, and today I will be reviewing the Leica Q2. Now be warned, this is my first review period, and I have no clue what I'm doing. But I did buy this camera, and I've had a bunch of friends ask me what I thought about it, so I am making this video. It will probably go way off on tangents that have nothing to do with this camera, which is probably why I should not be doing these videos. But here we are. Okay, so this is a Leica Q2. Leica Q2. Quickly, what it is, I assume you know what it is, but whatever. It is a full-frame digital camera. 47 megapixels. It has an attached 28mm lens that you cannot disconnect unless you're crazy and you will break it. It is a 1.7, it's called a 28mm Summilux, which is a fancy name for saying fast lens, kind of. And it is a Leica, so it's very expensive. And I will break it down. Why you should or should not have this camera, buy this camera, steal this camera, don't steal it. Sell this camera, whatever it is. So, first of all, the 28mm lens used to be a staple of photography. It still is for me. It's the perfect wide angle where you can get into a scene and tell a nice story and shoot all the way to the edges without really worrying about faces and other things getting wonky, right? Once you get to 24mm, the sides, the corners start getting really elongated. Wider than that, you really have to be careful. 28, you could just really get in there and gun it. It is the perfect day-to-day focal length. It's what the iPhone used to be until they decided to go wider. I think now they're like a 25, which is silly. And the ultra-wide is like 13, which is sillier. Anyways, you'd think that photo companies would be like, hey, 28mm is a great focal length. We are going to make really good 28mm. No, they did not do that. What they did is not make them. Okay, once upon a time they did. With every film camera, 28 was like, every film manufacturer had a really good 28. This was my go-to camera and lens for a long time. It's a f3, a Nikon f3, a 28mm manual focus 2.8 lens. This was my bread and butter. I shot with my family with this. I shot weddings with this. By far my most used combo. In the history of 28mm, there have been a few really good ones. First of all, Leica always had good stuff. Let's not talk about Leica right now. Nikon had a really good 28 1.4. Canon never really had a really good 28. Not in the autofocus world. Then, when cameras got fancier, Nikon made an even better 28, which they still have. It's made for SLR cameras. It's 28 1.4 EDG blah blah blah. And Canon still doesn't have a decent 28. Sony came out with a 28 f2, cheap little lens, decent performer, not really good. And I don't know if you've seen the Sony lineup, it's ridiculous. There's like a million lenses in each category besides for 28. In fact, before this lens here, there has never been a good autofocus 28mm lens made for mirrorless cameras. Not one. Besides, one made for the Contax G series, which is a little known, well, unless you know about them, then they're very well known, but a film camera, small little, and that was good. But this is the first really good and only fast 28mm lens made for mirrorless. All right, you could get a Sigma 28mm. It's not made for mirrorless. It just has like a added mount, and it is massive. I'm going to show you a picture of the combo here compared to the Leica Q. It is a massive lens that no one in their right mind would like grab to go to the grocery store with when they take their family, or go to the park and say, hey kids, let's go to the park and I'm going to grab my camera and get a hernia or something. No. So if you wanted a 28mm full frame camera, 28mm on a full frame small camera, you were out of luck. All right, you had to go to a crop camera, which is not the end of the world. Crop cameras, they have a bunch. They have a bunch of fixed frames. So they have like the GR series and this little known Fuji XF10, maybe. And Fuji recently, 5 years after this came out with an 18mm 1.4 lens, which is really good, which is like a 28mm. Anyways, point is, there's not much you can get in this focal length on a full frame camera. Nikon just now came out with a 28 2.8, but 2.8 is way slower than 1.7. So, point is, there is actually a need that this camera is filling. Now, let's talk about the camera itself. It's small. Ooh, we should do this thingy. Pretend there's fancy lights. All right. Leica has a specific way of doing things where they like keeping things minimal. And I'm not sure what their line is between like form and function. Sometimes they lean more towards form over function, which we'll talk about a little bit. But overall, it's a really pleasant camera to use. It works. And it's nice to use something that you know is made so well. It just feels good it feels good in the hand. It's like using a well-made knife or something. It's just, there's something to be said about using a camera that feels really good. You know, it's not just a tool to make photos, which cameras are in a way, but they're also our friends, and we like them. And we want them to be nice and kind and well-made. Okay, the lens is we said it's already 28mm, 1.7. It has a physical aperture ring, which controls the aperture. It doesn't actually control the aperture. It tells the camera to control the aperture. Not a huge difference, but it's, when the camera's turned off, you're not actually changing the aperture. Whereas, with an actual real mechanical lens, it's off the camera, you turn it, you're turning the aperture. And there is a difference. You can feel a difference a little bit. It still feels good. I'm a big fan of aperture rings on lenses. I like that Sony is keep doing that. I don't like that other cameras are not doing that. Let's say you shoot at f8, f1, 1.7, right? Much faster than, where am I, right? Okay, you could also stick it on automatic, on that A thing, and then it just goes into where you control the shutter speed, or automatic. Camera does everything. It moves in third stops, which is neither here nor there. I like half stops, but it's fine. It doesn't really make a difference to me. The camera can be used in manual focus. Actually has a little switch here. A little nifty little thing. And then I'll be talking about that more later on. And it has a macro mode where you switch this into macro. And you could see, if you saw there, it has like a distance scale. It actually changes when you go from regular to macro, which I think is pretty cool. Now, the camera itself, take out the lens, has a sensor that is massive. That's not true. It's a regular size sensor. But it produces an image which is massive. I think it's 47 point whatever megapixels. And I don't think the vast majority of people need that many megapixels, besides for the ability to crop, which this camera is made for. And I love this about this camera. So I'm going to show you what it does. Okay. Oh, let's put it in... whatever. Put it in autofocus so it doesn't... There. Okay. Focus. Now that's a 28mm frame. If you click this button here, actually usually it's this one, but I switched it. Then you see the 35mm frame lines, 50mm frame lines, 75mm frame lines. Take a picture. Boom. Right? I think that's really cool. Why is that really cool? First of all, it still saves the entire photo. But when you open Lightroom or whatever your editing program is, it comes pre-cropped. Now for me, I have a really hard time visualizing things that I'm not actually seeing. So when I see those frame lines, those little crop lines, it really helps to compose differently. And there are times when I want to be shooting with a 35 or a 50. And this makes it really easy to just switch between them. Now, the 75mm crop only gives you 8 megapixels, and you could print up to 8x10 for sure. But it's not massive. But the 50mm is definitely usable. 35 for sure. And I think that is a really good... I wish other cameras would do that. I think it's really smart. You know, when you have that many megapixels, make it easy to crop. The actual sensor is good. Color is really good. I had a really easy time editing these photos. Dynamic range is decent. I'm comparing to really modern cameras here. Compared to like anything 5, 7, 8 years ago, it's amazing. Compared to like the modern iterations of Sony or Canon or Nikon, I think it's pretty much up there with good ones. Highlight retention is horrible. Show you some photos right here. Blows out really quickly. You maybe have one stop of shadow retention. A highlight retention, sorry. Shadow retention is really good. Not as good as like a Sony a7 III, but close. But it does start to fall apart a little quicker. So you do have a little less usable dynamic range. It's still more than enough for most things. But for myself, I found myself needing to underexpose a little more than I was comfortable with sometimes. Because I really don't like blowing highlights. But that means you have to bring up the shadows more, which gets wonky colors a little bit. ISO goes up to, I have no clue what it goes up to. I don't even care. I only care what it's usable up to. And I'd have no problem using up to 6400, probably 10,000 in a pinch. I don't care about noise as much as the color. Color really takes a hit, and dynamic range starts to take a hit when you're going really high speeds or high ISOs. This here was taken at ISO 4000 and push 2 stops. I think it looks good, but there isn't much. I don't need the shadow detail here, and I don't need much other, so it works well for this type of shot. When you do want more shadow or highlights, then it's a problem. Here, I'll blow it up for you. Kind of swinging back and forth here because I have no clue what I'm doing. Back to the lens. The lens is super sharp. At 1.7, it's as sharp as you need a lens to be, pretty much. Maybe go down to f2.8 for absolute perfection everywhere in the frame. But there's no problem using it wide open for anything. The only reason you'd want to stop down is for more depth of field. Or maybe if you want a slower shutter speed or something. Or you want more easier focus. You know, you want to have a little more play with what's in focus, what's out of focus. The rendering is a little bit boring. Like the bokeh. It's nice. It's really nice. But it's nothing interesting. It's not very lively. I like lively bokeh. It's fine. I wouldn't buy this lens specifically for the bokeh. On the other hand, it has way better bokeh than other wide angles. So maybe, sometimes wider angles, they have the bokeh that kind of like strings out in the corners. A few of the Canons had that. The original 35L. I like cat's eye, but that's me. What else? Okay, here you have up to 2000 shutter speed, and this is a little bit weird. You have here you have options of 3, so to say, settings in between each stop, and here there's only one full stop each time, which is what it is. I guess that's what's gonna happen if. And it's also weird because the ISO also has full stops. 100, 200, 400, 800. You can't even go to 6400. The camera will, if it's an auto ISO, which is how I shoot, then it gives you whatever settings it wants, which is great. Here you have a wheel that you could control. I set it to exposure compensation, which is how I always shoot mirrorless cameras. Since I'm seeing what the actual picture will be, I let the camera choose the ISO. Sometimes I choose the shutter speed. I choose the aperture, sometimes the shutter speed. Camera chooses the ISO, and then I just use this sucker right here to make it brighter, less bright. Menu system's really well thought out. I like how you click on the menu right here. Sorry, let's try that again. Click on the menu, it gives you this screen. And right away have access to like, well, your manual mode, you don't really change the manual mode. It's interesting. You don't go into, the way to change out of manual mode is to change, your aperture shutter speed. Your shutter speed is up here, so clicking on that won't do anything. Actually, it will. Wait, weird. Then what? I don't know. ISO, I like how you could just click on the A to make auto ISO. And then on other cameras, you have to scroll through all the ISOs to get back to auto ISO. Here, you just click on and off, which is really cool. I like that a lot. AF single shot or autofocus continuous. Fine. Stop it. Stop it. Here you have different types of focus modes. I pretty much stuck with spot, sometimes face detection. Tracking doesn't work amazingly. I'll talk about that in a second. Single shot or like cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha. It's not the fastest camera, so stick on single. Vivid, this is basically, it's going to change your JPEG settings or what you're seeing through the camera. But it won't actually change the output of the RAW. So it doesn't really matter so much. Why am I going through this? I don't care. Basically, it's very easy to set little these things here. And then, of course, you could go further on into the menu to get through all the other settings. It's way more intuitive than Sony. Way easier. I honestly haven't used the other mirrorless cameras, so I assume they're better than Sony, because Sony is horrible in that department. It has a few customizable buttons, like this button right here. I customized it to have the frame lines. Usually this one does the frame lines. I set this to focus lock, and here you have another. You could add different things here. It's mostly what you need. Now I'm going to tell you my issues with the camera. Nope, not yet. Sorry, I'm as I mentioned, I'm horrible at this. This is beautiful. The LCD. LSD? Always get them mixed up. LCD. And the viewfinder is also really beautiful. It does tend to be a little brighter. So you might, which makes you think that the image is brighter, which makes you underexpose a little bit. So just something to be aware of. It switches really nicely between them. The only time it gets annoying is if you put a hand over to touch something, but I'm going to go back to spot because what I use. Fine. I like, you could easily change the focus point just by touching it. No, it's not true because I'm in manual focus. Try that again. There we go. Touch, touch, touch. It's pretty cool. Focus is very accurate, very fast. It's a very small, this is like the small focus point. So if it hits like a blank surface, it won't quickly focus on something very close to it. So if you're like on a cheek, right under the eye, it might like, not sure, it might mess up a little bit. But anyways, it's still real. When it gets, when it almost always hits and is very accurate, very fast. I was very impressed. I thought it would be slower. Get some more light in here. There we go. Now, I'm going to talk about some issues with the camera. Because I am actually not going to be keeping this camera. I wanted to love it. But for the price, it's like, I think it retails for like $5,800 or something, or $6,500. I should check this out. I'm going to check it out. Sorry, I know you could check it out, but I'm also going to check it out. La 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 la. Let's go B&H Q2. Yeah, $5,700. $5,695. All right. The batteries, this is ridiculous. The batteries cost around $270. That's not cool. All right, Leica, that's not cool. There's no reason these batteries should cost that much. I understand that, like, you make your lenses better, maybe your tolerances are better or something, but there is no reason under the sun to charge that much for battery. How the battery works is actually really cool. You touch that there. That's it. Slick it back in. It's probably the best battery system I've seen, which is impressive coming from Leica because they're not the biggest innovators. It only has one card slot. It looks like they were going to have another card slot in there and then got lazy because there's a spot right there that nothing's happening. They're like, we don't have time for this. Whatever. Need more light. Oh, come on. There we go. Oh, now the sun's on me. Urgh. Okay. I'm going to have a beer now because I deserve it. Chaim. Baruch atah Adonai Olam she'kol neh b'dvar. Okay, here are my pet peeves with this. Small pet peeve. It's not that comfortable to hold for long periods. They do sell a little grip that costs like $180 because it's Leica. And they sell a little thumb thing. On the other hand, though, I use this camera for years and it feels exactly... Oh, actually, this one has a little grip. But it's also... You're also mostly pushing down to hold it. So... It's not like the end of the world. Nitpick here, there is no eye cup. So if you have glasses and you're holding it like this, if you are outside and there is sun around you, it's going to be hard to see through the viewfinder. It's a big deal. So more than a nitpick. I like the... It has a... What's it called? Come on, Zalmi, you can do it. You can do it. You can do it. Depth thing. Tells you how much depth of field you have at a given aperture. But only in manual focus mode. I like having that information in autofocus mode also. I forgot to mention. The manual focus feels really good. Better than any autofocus lens I've ever used. And it's not focused by wire. Meaning, no matter how fast you turn it, it changes the distance in your focusing. Whereas with this camera, let's see, here's like an autofocus lens, which also feels pretty good. It's a 35mm 1.4. When you focus slowly, it moves very slowly. I think I'm gonna have to show you this, what I'm talking about here. Why can't you see anything? There we go. Okay, I'm gonna go to focus mode, manual focus. Okay, so if you see, what's going on here? It's not working. Come on, Zombie, you can figure this out. But it's not working. The lens is not... What? Okay, there we go. Sorry. So here you can see the focus. So I'm moving the lens slowly. It's moving across very slowly, but my hand's moving all the way around. So you can move a full 360 before it gets to the other side, because it's being very precise. Whereas if I move quickly, it goes all the way to the other side almost. See that? Just 180. All the way to the other side. So it's good for precise focusing, but you can't focus by feel. You can't know where you are based on where the this little gear thingy is, the helicoid is. Whereas with this camera, you could pretty easily know this is the hard stop is infinity. Other hard stop is, I don't know, whatever it is. Get to know what it is, right? And like here, you move it here a little bit, it's probably 7 feet. Look at it, yeah, 6 and a little bit. Right, because you can know exactly, and once you use the camera long enough, you could really get pretty accurate just by like moving it and knowing how far you're moving it. You cannot do that with most modern autofocus lenses. So that is definitely a plus in the Leica's favor. Turn on the light in this room. Doubt that helped at all. Whew. Okay, now I will tell you my biggest problem with this camera. And it is a huge problem. And basically, it boils down to this for me, why I will not be keeping this camera. This camera, the Leica Q2, does not have back button focus. Now, it does, in a way. You could focus with this little button right here. Okay? And then it locks. And then you press the shutter. But the shutter, when you press it again, it focuses. There's no way to disconnect the shutter from focusing. And here is why that's a problem. Let me just get into the benefits of back button focusing. And then you'll see why it's such a big problem. Especially for certain types of photographers. If you're a portrait photographer, it probably does make a big difference. If you're a documentary photographer, if you ever wait for a shot, then it makes a big difference. I will show you the light. This is a Sony a7R III. Definitely has back button focus. So, on this camera, I have AF on, set to focus. And then shutter speed will not, the shutter will not focus. Okay? There. Now, why this is good? First of all, it's set to continuous focus. So I could focus on this, and then move her in, and it keeps on focusing, right? But if I want to focus quickly and go somewhere else, it's not going to keep focusing because I let go. So you have single shot focus and continuous focus in one mode. You don't have to switch modes, which is really useful. Number two, that's one reason to have. Number two is when you ever wait for a shot, right? You have a scene coming in front of you, especially if you're not shooting wide open. Let's say you're shooting at f4 or 28 millimeter. You have a, and this scene is like, 10 feet away. So you have a good few feet of whatever is going to be in focus. 2 feet even, right? I mean, you don't need completely 100% to keep focusing for a shot. And you're waiting for a scene to play out. People are moving around. That means things are getting in front of the focal point. And especially if you ever have to move the camera, that means your focal point moves also. That means you always have to be worried about where the focal point is, because every time you press that shutter, the camera's going to refocus. And that is something you just don't want to be worrying about. Another reason is some things that are hard to focus. For example, here my kids are playing on the, what's it called? The seesaw, right? And here you have them in focus because I took a photo of them on the seesaw. And next shot's out of focus because I had the camera refocused on, and I missed the kid because it's kind of hard to, he's going up and down on a seesaw. It's hard to keep the focal point on him. I should just be able to focus once on him and then keep on shooting through the scene. Here also, this is how I shoot a lot. This was a scene playing out. I'm, photographing and getting ready. I'm just waiting there are different things happening. I'm waiting for the scene to play out. I'm shooting through it. And every time I shoot, it's refocusing. And I'm constantly moving around. That means I always have to be aware of where that focal point is. And in fact, I misfocus here. I wanted to focus on this kid because that would be kind of in between the bride and the background. And there's enough depth of field to get that. Instead, it focused on her in the background. So now I have all the foliage here pretty much in focus, but not the front, which is okay in this case. But I shouldn't have to. I shouldn't have to. Same thing here. Very similar scene. Now I'm just waiting for the scene to play out, and people are moving around, and I'm going up and down and waiting for people. And I focus once and forget about it. Focus and forget, and you can't do that here. Same here. I'm shooting at f11. There's no reason I need to focus every shot. I'm just waiting for all the things to, to play well. And it's just... Or there are scenes that are actually hard to focus. For example, here, right? When you're shooting through this trampoline, right? Yeah, you theoretically want to focus like halfway in the trampoline, like right there. But it's hard to do that. So you focus once on the side of the trampoline right there, then forget about it. Here you can't do that. So I ended up focusing on this kid, and they are a little bit out of focus. And that's just not how I shoot. And this is, I can't say enough how this is a really big deal for me. It makes shooting unpleasant. And that's the whole point of this camera, is that you should be happy to grab the camera and go wherever you want. And that's... Now, honestly, I don't really shoot a 28mm professionally anymore. When I shoot things, events, I shoot usually with a 21 and a 35. If I still shot with a 28, I might have kept it. I still don't think I would. I mean, that back button focus is a really, really big deal. And then all the other nitpicks for the price. I mean, if this camera would be $2,000, then maybe, right? But it's not. Then it's also, it's slow. You know, the buffer isn't great. You shoot quickly, 10 shots, you're gone. You have to wait a minute. While I was shooting a reception, I was gunning it away. The camera froze 3 times. I had to pop out the battery. And I lost like 1 photo each time. Again, not cool. Let's see, what else? Okay, now theoretically, if it's what I ended up doing a lot, is basically you manual focus when you don't want to keep focusing for each shot. Which works, but it's a workaround. Like, you shouldn't have to. If you have a autofocus camera, you should be able to quickly use the autofocus exactly as you want to. Additionally, most cameras, every camera I've used, when you switch to manual focus, the camera keeps the focus, and then you could tweak it from there. With this camera, once you engage the manual focus, it always starts by infinity. So you can't focus and like, oh, I want to keep that focus, quickly change to manual focus. You can't do that. So if you want to shoot and not focus for each shot, you need to start with manual focus. And it's just slower. One of the things, again, I'm all over the place. One of the things I like is that a focus is wide open. A lot of mirrorless cameras do not. They don't focus wide open. They focus at whatever your aperture is. So here you have 5.6. I don't know if you can see, it stops down afterwards. So you're always looking wide open, which definitely helps for manual focus. It also helps for focus accuracy, because once the camera is getting a darker image, it's harder for it to focus. For example, here you're at f16. Oh, it takes a while for it to focus. It can't even focus on this. Yeah. See that? That's all over the place. Not cool. So that's definitely a plus. On the other hand, I think it does make a very slight lag between when you press the shutter, because then it has to. But every camera had to do that. I'm not sure if. Another thing, this has a leaf. I'm going all over the place. This has a leaf shutter, which means the shutter's in the lens, not the camera, and that means that you can have full flash sync up to 2000, which is pretty amazing. Even though I don't ever use that. It's also very quiet, and it also doesn't shake the camera much. And this camera has irritable bowel syndrome, which helps I was in the mirror, but the sensor, it doesn't shake, which is pretty cool. So basically, I could handle this camera 1/8 of a second fairly easily, 1/15 always. A quarter of a second, if I fire off a few shots, one of them is going to be sharp, even like when viewed at full megapixels, which is pretty amazing. It's a quiet, it's a really cool camera. That back button focus thing is a killer for me. It really is a killer. Another annoying thing, which I never bump into because I never use it because it's annoying, is if you go to tracking, right? Let's say you want to track that camera right there. It's tracking. Nope, it's not tracking. There's tracking. You press, and it starts in the middle again. So if you're tracking something and you're coming towards you, you take the picture, and then the tracking spot moves off them. If you're in like continuous mode, like you hold down you hold down the shutter and it keeps on tripping, then it will work, but it's so slow. And even if you move it to there, take the picture. Sorry, it's like way underexposed. I'm at 2000, that's why. There we go. Let's say you move it to there, take the picture, starts in the middle again. Who's designing these cameras? Another nitpick for me was I like seeing my settings right when I pick up the camera, which is one of the reasons I love the shutter dial and the aperture. But one of the things I like seeing is especially if I'm shooting in auto and I don't care about the shutter speed so much, I like seeing what my exposure compensation is at, and you don't, because you could change the wheel to do other things. Whereas with this camera, you could right away look and see what your compensation is at. Another deal is if you look, you got the full frame here. Once you push down, you lose the bottom. And you forget that you lose the bottom sometimes. So there is stuff happening on the bottom of the frame that you are not seeing, especially if you change the... Here, right now, you're not seeing the full frame. Is that crazy? When you look through the camera, though, then you do. When you look through the viewfinder, because it's a little taller, so it has room. But I even after using this camera for a few weeks, I kept on forgetting that... Sorry, I need to change this back. I kept on forgetting that there is more space here and on top. So unless you go out of there completely, but you still, once you push down, then you lose that bottom. What else about the camera matters? It's a great camera. I think that's about it. It's a really good camera, really good croppability, really good color. Its downsides, as we said, biggest downside is, especially when you're counting in the price, biggest downside is no back button focus. That is an absolute deal breaker for me. Now, another nitpick, like we said, is the very little, it blows highlights very easily. Honestly, one other thing that's weirdly bothered me is it comes with, now, these I put in, but it came with the strap, these things here. It just doesn't seem nearly as strong as what Nikon comes with. Canon. What? It's not a Nikon or a Canon. Stop it. That Sony comes with. It just seems way more secure, that thing right there. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just something I feel. It would be nice if it had the joystick. It does not. So it has these little arrows that are a little less, it's further down and a little less intuitive. But I mean, it's intuitive, but it's just, you have to move your finger around. Yeah. Okay, so no back button focus. The screen does not articulate, which makes it much harder to shoot up and down. Now, normally it wouldn't be such a big deal, but since it's focusing every time, I don't know what it's focusing on because I can't see. So I'd have to either just like hope it's focusing on something, or like just know where the middle is and know that there's something there it's focusing on, or change to manual focus. Not cool, Leica. Not cool. Yeah, so who should get this camera? If you shoot with 28 millimeters, or you want to shoot with 28 millimeters, it would be a lens that would be on one of your other cameras very often. Then it makes sense to get this camera. If not, well, if you have the money, then go ahead. If you're using it, if money is a issue, as with most photographers, then unless it's a focal length that you are really going to be using all the time, its downsides just, in my opinion, override what awesomeness there is. Unless you don't shoot with back button focus. Yeah, fine. So this camera's for you if you shoot 28mm all the time. You don't normally use back button focus. You don't use fancy autofocus techniques like tracking and stuff. And you find yourself sometimes not grabbing your camera because it's not fun to use and it's too big. This camera will work very well for you. Especially if you like have your own life, you like focusing, like photographing. Great camera. The focal length is just a good all-rounder. If you don't like 28 millimeters, then maybe it's not for you. Yeah, I think that's all. This has been a lot of fun and probably very unhelpful. Oh, I forgot to mention, I have a composition course. Details are below. Link is below on composition.com. If you want to subscribe to my channel, I don't even know if I have a channel. I probably will do another video in 3 years from now, so don't subscribe. Or do. Doesn't matter. If you comment in the comments I will respond with a comment, probably. Unless it's mean, then I won't respond. And did I miss anything? I don't think so. I think I covered everything. All right. Au revoir. This was fun. Peace out, y'all.